Welcome back to our head-to-head bakkie test with the new Ranger Fx4 and new Navara. In part 1 we loaded them up with half a ton of water and then tested these bakkies on-road comfort and interiors. In this episode we'll take the bakkies up into the mountains behind the wine farm for a thorough off-road test. But before we set off, we had to make a few adjustments. The surface on the Ford's load bed is really slippery for some reason. It's kind of like rubberized plastic, which is cool, it protects the body and everything, but the load, the tanker, is really slipping around a lot. So we've come back to the warehouse and Warwick's going to handle the strapping because I would just stuff it up completely. That feels better. So we're leaving the safety and comfort of the wine farm, and Dave was a little bit nervous that maybe we're pushing them a bit far, but I mean the manufacturers that say they can hold a ton, you know? These things must work. Still a bakkie after all, as luxurious as it is, but they're definitely turning into the kind of cars which you can live with every day. They're comfortable on-road, they're pretty capable off-road, the interiors are quite luxurious, pretty comfortable, lots of tech features. Let me just interrupt myself. This dam, when it was built about 100 years ago, was the biggest man-made dam in the Western Cape. And it's on the farm, it's one of their dams. So the plan for the off-road section of today is that we're going to do a loop around the farm up into the hills. And I'm going to do a loop in the Ford and then a loop in the Nissan and then give my rating on which one I think coped best with this task. So you might be watching and thinking to yourself, why would you need to carry half a ton of stuff on the back of a bakkie when with these leisure bakkies especially, people are just going to carry, you know, their dogs and maybe their kids' mountain bikes. But of course, it's really nice to know that your bakkie can cope with all that weight. It's like the same as buying a really powerful sports car. You're never going to do 320 kilometers an hour in your Ferrari, but it's nice to know that it can. And of course, you can tell your friends. So let's talk about pricing. The Fx4 Special Edition Ranger that I'm in, which was basically created by Ford so that people stop buying those stupid Raptor kits, costs about 608,000 Rand, which is about 10,000 Rand less than the Wild Track, and it's about 20,000 more than the Navara. There is that old saying that there's no replacement for displacement, and I kind of get the feeling that it applies here. So 2.3 litre twin turbo in the Nissan, 3.2 litre 5-cylinder turbo in here in the Ford. And I mean, we're heading up a decent hill now. Obviously got that half a ton on the back and I'm barely using the throttle. Almost feels like I could idle up here. And I'm still in 2-wheel drive as well. Haven't used 4-wheel drive yet. So really impressive engine this. Not feeling the weight on the back at all. So not a big power difference between these two cars. 147 kilowatts in the Ford, 470 Newton meters versus 140 kilowatts in the Navara with 450 Newton meters. So very close, even though the Navara has a much smaller engine. But interestingly, the Navara is a lot lighter than the Ford, actually about over 230 kgs lighter. And I did some maths last night, and the Navara actually has a better power to weight ratio than the Ford. But I think what is making a difference here is the displacement of the Ford, this big engine giving me a lot of torque low down in the revs. Oh, that's nice and big. It's a big obstacle, that. Test the brake over angle a little bit. Nice. I cannot believe how little throttle I am using to get this Ford up this hill with half a ton of water on the back. So I'm just in 4 high, I haven't even used low range yet. And in terms of fuel consumption, you would hope that the Navara would be a lot more frugal than the big Ford. And it is, but not by too much, just about 10%. So on the way out here to the farm, it's about a 60k drive on highways. Dave and I both reset our trip computers. The Ford averaged 11 to the 100 and the Navara averaged 10 to the 100.
In the interest of scientific testing, we swapped cars and travelled exactly the same route around Backsberg so that I could directly compare the Ranger with the Navara.
Right, I've been driving the Navara for a few days now, so I'm quite used to its on-road capabilities. Very excited to test it off-road. And as I mentioned when we did the on-road testing just now, this new Navara has a trick new suspension. It's much more similar to that which you'd find in a fancy SUV, quite different to the normal bakkie suspension that we're used to. So has it worked for Nissan? Well, on first impressions, it does feel a lot softer than the Ranger. I suppose that can be a good and a bad thing, but it actually seems to be doing a lot better out here on the gravel than it did on the tar. I think those very short undulations on the tar were kind of really throwing the suspension out a little bit. But out here where we're a bit slower and the ground's not as rutted, the ride quality does feel pretty good. I feel like we could still strap a 1-ton trailer to the back of these cars and they wouldn't even battle. So in terms of looks, which is always subjective, I do think I like the Navara a little bit more. So on paper, these cars are very, very similar. Not much between them in terms of price. In terms of engine, obviously there's quite a bit of a difference, but they're both 4x4s. They're both automatics, although the Navara is a 7-speed, the Ranger is a 6-speed. Both of them claim that they will tow 3.5-ton braked trailers. Both of them take about a ton on the back of the bakkie, a little bit more in the Navara's case, a bit more than a ton. Both of them have 7 airbags. They're really, really direct rivals here. And of course, South Africans had to wait a long time for this new Navara to arrive. So everyone was hoping that it was going to be really, really good. And to be honest, I'm not disappointed. I'm not impressed or not unimpressed by the Navara. It's just that the breadth of talent of the Ranger is just so good. So much scope to that car and its abilities that the Navara has to be really, really good. So I've stopped on quite a steep hill here. And I just want to feel how the Navara pulls away. Yeah, not bad at all. Definitely have to give it a little bit more beans than in the Ranger, but really, really negligible. The one thing I will say about the Navara's engine though is it is quite a bit louder than the Ranger's. A bit more clackety clack, 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 like an old-fashioned diesel. You definitely notice the engine a little bit more. Yeah, you've got to give it a little bit more boot to do the steep stuff. And the Navara is coping really well. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's doing exactly the same thing that the Ranger did. Maybe it's about 5% more difficult in the Navara, I would say. I say you've got to give it about 5% more boot to get up the same sort of incline. But this 2.3 litre motor is really impressive. I mean, if no one told you it was a 2.3, I don't think you'd ever guess that it was such a small displacement.
Running around the mountains was good fun, but we had to head back down to the warehouse to offload our tankers. There's really very little to separate these two bakkies. After an entire day driving both back to back, I was struggling to choose a winner in this head-to-head.
Recently, a wise man told me that if you're really struggling to choose between two options, it probably means that both of them are right for you. And I think that is the case with this Navara versus Ranger battle. But there's two things for me, well, maybe three things. The infotainment system on the Navara, just not good enough. The ride quality on tar, not as good as the Ranger. And then there's the diesel notes, the gruffness of the engine in the Navara, which is just a bit more noticeable than it is in the Ranger. So for those three little things, I think the Ranger has to take it in this competition. It would probably be the one that I would take home. But that takes nothing away from the Navara. It's a very good new bakkie from Nissan.
Remember, the best way to compare these cars in detail is with our compare tool, which you'll find on our site and in our smartphone app, with download links in the description below. If you agree with us, please comment below. And if you disagree with our conclusion, please comment below. Thanks for watching.
Alrighty, big thank you to Backsberg for letting us use their forklift and their water tankers and some of their water, which is going back in the dam now, I promise, and their farm. It's been really, really cool. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, put really heavy things on top of bakkies and then test them. So huge thank you to Simon and all the guys at Backsberg. And Lance, of course. Bye, Lance. He's gonna ride into the sunset now in his forklift. Bye, Lance. Bye.
Let us know what you think in the comments below. We'd love for you to join our community by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.